It was the decade when America dreamed without limits, when the streets buzzed with jazz, factories roared with progress, and fortunes were made overnight. But beneath the glittering skyline of the roaring 20s, something dangerous was quietly brewing, a ticking financial time bomb that would soon destroy everything. Welcome to ChronoCapital, the channel where we explore how moments in history shaped the world of money, markets, and power. Today's story will take us back nearly a century to the time when America's unstoppable boom came crashing down. This is the story of the Great Depression, when America's economy collapsed. The 1920s, a decade of wild optimism. World War I was over, the world was rebuilding, and America was leading that new age of modern prosperity. Cars rolled off assembly lines like clockwork. Henry Ford's Model T was everywhere. Cities were electrified, radios connected millions, and skyscrapers reached new heights in New York and Chicago. Money wasn't just being made, it was being believed in. Stocks were the new gold rush. Ordinary Americans, housewives, farmers, factory workers, everyone wanted a piece of the Wall Street dream. People didn't talk about if they'd get rich, they talked about when. But dreams built too high have a way of collapsing under their own weight. By 1928, the U.S. stock market was a casino on steroids. Share prices kept climbing, faster than company profits, faster than reason itself. People borrowed money to buy stocks. $1,000 of savings could become $10,000 in shares, thanks to a little trick called buying on margin. Banks and brokers encouraged it. Newspapers glorified it. The government ignored it. Every dinner conversation in America circled around easy money. A janitor could invest $50 and believe he was one trade away from being rich. Even the president, Calvin Coolidge, declared, "The business of America is business." It was a nation in love with success and blind to risk. Late 1928, a few smart minds, economists, bankers, started noticing trouble. Production was slowing. Farmers were drowning in debt. Wages couldn't keep up with the cost of living. But on Wall Street, euphoria drowned out reason. Then came September 1929. Stock prices wobbled. Just a little, but panic started to whisper through the trading floors. A few days later, on October 24th, Black Thursday, the whisper became a scream. Stocks began to tumble. Investors rushed to sell. Phones rang nonstop. People screamed, pleaded, and prayed. In one single day, a record 13 million shares were traded. The ticker tapes fell behind by hours. Nobody knew what their stocks were worth, only that they were worth less every second. Big bankers tried to stop the bleeding. They formed alliances, bought massive amounts of blue-chip stocks, hoping to calm the market. For a brief moment, it worked. The next day, prices stabilized. But the calm was an illusion. A storm far worse was about to hit. October 29th, 1929, Black Tuesday. A day that would echo through history. When the market opened, there was no hope left, only chaos. Traders ran to their phones, clerks fainted. Everyone wanted to sell, no one wanted to buy. In a few hours, $14 billion in wealth vanished. By the end of the week, $30 billion. To put that in perspective, that was more than the total cost of World War I for the U.S. People stood outside Wall Street silent in disbelief. Rich men became poor, banks started trembling, and across America, a chill of fear replaced the fever of greed. What began as a stock market panic was about to become something far darker, a complete collapse of the American dream. The crash didn't stay on Wall Street, it spread like wildfire. Banks had invested their depositors' money into stocks. When markets crashed, those investments evaporated. People rushed to withdraw their savings, and banks simply didn't have the cash. Bank runs began. Lines of desperate citizens formed outside every branch. "Your money's safe," bankers said, but few believed them. Between 1930 and 1933, over 9,000 banks failed. Entire life savings disappeared overnight, and with no money, businesses couldn't pay workers. Factories closed. Shops went dark. Families lost homes, farms, dignity. The American economy fell into free fall, and there was no safety net, no FDC, no unemployment insurance, no welfare, only despair. By 1932, 1 in 4 Americans was out of work. Men stood in bread lines for hours just to get a meal. Women stitched old clothes to survive another winter. Children fainted from hunger in schools. People built Hoovervilles, shanty towns made of scrap wood and tin, named bitterly after President Hoover, who many blamed for doing nothing. In the Dust Bowl states, drought and economic ruin joined forces. Entire families packed up and moved west, searching for any job, any hope. Photographers like Dorothea Lange captured the haunting faces of mothers holding hungry babies. Those images became the soul of a broken nation. For the first time, the land of opportunity had become the land of despair. President Hoover believed the market would fix itself. He refused direct government aid and calling it socialism. He urged businesses to keep faith, but faith couldn't fill stomachs. Faith couldn't pay rent. And as the suffering grew unbearable, so did the anger. Protests erupted. The bonus army, veterans demanding early payment of war bonuses, marched on Washington in 1932. The government responded with force, using tear gas and tanks against its own citizens. The American dream seemed dead, but history has a strange rhythm. Just when things seem darkest, the first flicker of change begins to appear. 1932, a new voice emerged. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a man with calm confidence who promised a new deal for the American people. He spoke not of markets, but of humanity, not of numbers, but of courage. When Roosevelt took office in 1933, he faced a nation on the brink of collapse, but he brought something Wall Street could never trade: hope. By 1933, America wasn't just broken, it was broken. Banks had failed, families had starved, faith in the system had crumbled. But amidst the chaos, one man stood up and promised a new deal. Not just for Wall Street, not just for politicians, but for the people. This is how Franklin D. Roosevelt changed the course of history, and how America fought its way back from the abyss. It's March 4, 1933. Cold winds sweep across Washington, D.C., but the air is electric. Thousands gather around the Capitol. Franklin D. Roosevelt, a man who could barely walk, paralyzed from the waist down by polio, steps forward to take the oath of office. And then he speaks the words that still echo through time. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. In that single sentence, Roosevelt didn't just address an economic crisis. He declared war on fear itself. America didn't need pity, it needed purpose. And FDR was about to give it one. When FDR took office, the financial system was on life support. Thousands of banks had shut their doors. People no longer trusted money itself. So Roosevelt acted fast, faster than any president before him. Within 36 hours of becoming president, he declared a nationwide bank holiday. For 1 week, every bank in America closed. Panic spread, but behind the scenes, FDR's team was crafting a miracle. Roosevelt addressed the nation directly over radio, his first fireside chat. I can assure you that it is safer to keep your money in a reopened bank than under your mattress. That one calm voice changed everything. When banks reopened a week later, crowds didn't rush to withdraw. They rushed to deposit. Faith, the very thing that had vanished, was slowly being restored. Roosevelt launched an unprecedented wave of government programs, the kind of economic intervention the U.S. had never seen before. They called it the New Deal. Its goal was simple: relief, recovery, reform. Relief for the unemployed, recovery for the economy, reform to make sure this never happened again. Factories began to reopen. Massive public works projects started. Roads, bridges, dams. Programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, hiring young men to plant trees and build parks. The Works Progress Administration, WPA, millions building highways, schools, and hospitals. The Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, bringing electricity to rural America. For the first time, the U.S. government became an engine of opportunity, not just an observer. To some, it looked like socialism. To others, it looked like survival. But to ordinary Americans, it felt like hope. Finally, someone was fighting for them. The New Deal wasn't just about jobs, and it was about justice. FDR's administration went after the reckless speculation and greed that caused the collapse. New laws were passed. The Glass-Steagall Act separated risky investment banks from traditional savings banks. The Securities Act of 1933 forced companies to tell the truth about their finances. The SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, born to watch over Wall Street. For the first time, America had financial referees. The wild casino days were over. The age of accountability had begun. Throughout the mid-1930s, a new sound filled the air, the sound of work. You could hear it in the clatter of construction, the hum of engines, the whistle of trains. People were working again. Not everyone, not everywhere, but enough to make hope visible again. Farmers got help through subsidies. Homeowners got relief through refinancing. The elderly received Social Security, a promise that no American would face old age alone. This was more than recovery. It was reinvention. The U.S. government wasn't just fixing an economy, it was rewriting the social contract. Of course, not everyone cheered. Conservatives accused Roosevelt of overreach, of turning capitalism into socialism. The Supreme Court struck down several of his programs, and even within his own party, critics emerged, like Senator Huey Long of Louisiana, who shouted, "Every man a king." He wanted wealth redistribution. Others wanted tax revolts. America was rebuilding, yes, but the debates over how far to go burned hot. Yet through it all, FDR never backed down. He didn't just rebuild banks, he rebuilt belief. As America rebuilt, the world around it fell deeper into despair. In Europe, unemployment and inflation fueled extremism. In Germany, a failed artist named Adolf Hitler promised his own recovery. The seeds of World War II were being planted, watered by the same economic despair that had begun on Wall Street. The Great Depression didn't just shape America, it shaped the world order. And while the U.S. was climbing out of its darkest hour, the storm clouds of another global tragedy were gathering. By 1937, the economy had improved significantly. Factories were hiring again. Stock markets were slowly recovering. Confidence was returning. But recovery wasn't linear. When FDR tried to cut spending too soon, the economy dipped again. The recession within the depression. Still, something fundamental had changed. Americans no longer felt powerless. They believed the government could act, that collective action could make a difference. And perhaps the most powerful legacy of all, the Great Depression taught America that wealth without wisdom is ruin, and progress without balance is peril. The Great Depression began with fear, chaos, and hunger, but it ended with a nation reborn on stronger, wiser, and ready to lead the world. This is how America turned tragedy into triumph, how the ashes of economic collapse became the foundation of global power, and how the lessons of that dark era still echo through our economy today. As the 1930s ended, the storm Roosevelt had feared finally arrived. War broke out in Europe. Germany invaded invaded Poland, Britain and France declared war, and once again the world stood on the edge of chaos. But this time, America wasn't the same broken nation it had been 10 years earlier. It had rebuilt its spirit, its industry, and its faith in itself. When World War II began, the factories built under the New Deal became the engines of war production. Steel mills that once made cars now made tanks. Aircraft plants worked around the clock. Women filled the factories. Rosie the Riveter became a national symbol of resilience. The Great Depression had taught Americans how to survive hardship. Now that same strength would help them save the world. In 1940, President Roosevelt made a bold declaration. We must become the great arsenal of democracy. America began producing weapons, vehicles, and supplies not only for itself, but for the Allies fighting against tyranny. Jobs skyrocketed. Factories that had been silent now roared with life. Unemployment, once 25%, dropped to nearly zero. The Depression was officially over. War had pulled the economy into overdrive, but more than that, it pulled the nation together. Men went overseas. Women took over the workforce. Minorities fought for inclusion and opportunity. It wasn't perfect and far from it, but it was progress. From a land of despair, America became a land of purpose. December 7, 1941, a date that would change everything. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, America's entry into World War II became inevitable. The country that once couldn't feed its own citizens was now the leader of the free world. Factories worked day and night. Men and women served with unshakable unity. The lessons of the Depression, saving, producing, sacrificing, became national virtues. By 1945, America emerged not just victorious, but transformed. The war had ended. Europe was in ruins. Japan lay in ashes, and the United States stood alone as the world's new economic superpower. The end of the war marked the beginning of a new era. Factories shifted from bombs to consumer goods. Homes were built by the millions. The GI Bill gave veterans education and opportunity. America entered what historians call the golden age of capitalism. Between 1945 and 1970, the economy soared. Wages rose. Unemployment stayed low, and a new middle class was born. People who had once stood in breadlines now owned homes, cars, and dreams again. But the most powerful thing built in those years, it wasn't a bridge or a skyscraper. It was belief in the idea that no matter how deep the fall, America could always rise again. The Great Depression left scars that never faded and lessons that still guide every financial decision today. Unregulated greed destroys nations. When markets run wild, the system collapses. Leadership matters. Roosevelt didn't fix the economy overnight. He rebuilt confidence. Sometimes that's the real foundation of recovery. Every crisis carries opportunity. The same generation that faced soup lines would later build the world's largest economy. Out of fear came regulation. Out of ruin came resilience. Out of despair came destiny. Decades later, the echoes of the Great Depression still shape every economic crisis. In 2008, when the housing market collapsed, the lessons of the 1930s guided the response. Government stimulus, bailouts, bank oversight. During the 2020 pandemic, those same New Deal ideas returned. Direct aid, public investment, and the belief that government can help people survive. History doesn't repeat itself perfectly, but it rhymes. And every time the world faces chaos, we look back to 1929 to remember what happens when fear overtakes faith. The Great Depression wasn't just a story about money. It was a story about people, about courage, about endurance, about a nation that refused to give up when everything seemed lost. True wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in resilience, unity, and the ability to rebuild again and again. And that's what America discovered, that its greatest resource wasn't gold, oil, or Wall Street. It was its people. The Great Depression began with panic and ended with purpose. It destroyed fortunes but built character. It broke systems but created safeguards. It revealed greed and birthed compassion. Though nearly a century has passed, the same truth remains. Economies rise and fall, but courage endures. Because in every crash lies a lesson, and in every recovery, a story worth remembering.